royal arena of Zintheria shimmered beneath twin suns. Crowds of alien nobles filled the crystal balconies, their eyes fixed on the circular arena below where warriors from 100 worlds had gathered. Each was the finest of their kind, strong, proud, and deadly. Today they faced the royal test, a challenge set by Princess Valara herself, daughter of the High Empress. It was said no one had ever passed it. Valara stood tall on her silver dais, her violet armor reflecting light like liquid fire. Her voice echoed through the arena. To serve the royal house, she declared, you must master not only strength but heart. One by one, the elite warriors stepped forward. Giants from the Varkon tribe smashed targets with hammers. The winged Seraphon knights dodged plasma bolts mid-air. Others demonstrated psychic control, fire breathing, and mind bonding. Yet after each performance, Valara's expression remained calm, unimpressed. Then came the final round, the test of empathy. The princess released a small creature, fragile and trembling, into the center of the ring. The warriors were told only one thing: protect it at all costs. The first contender, a scaled titan named Drokar, swung too hard and crushed the cage. The next, a telepath, tried to control the creature's mind, only to drive it mad. One after another failed, their strength turning into destruction. The crowd grew restless. Whispers rippled through the arena. Is this some kind of trick? One warrior muttered. Impossible task, another hissed. When the last alien warrior fell to his knees in shame, Valara sighed. Her gaze swept across the stands, and that's when she saw him. A human janitor wearing a gray maintenance uniform was quietly sweeping the floor near the gates. His nameplate read Elias. He wasn't part of the test. He wasn't even supposed to be noticed. Yet something about his calm focus caught the princess's eye. Valara smirked. You, she said, pointing her glowing spear at him. Human, step forward, the arena gasped. A janitor? Humans were rare on Zintheria. Useful laborers, but hardly warriors. Elias blinked, confused. Me, Your Highness. Valara's tone was teasing. Yes, perhaps you would like to try. Surely if my finest champions cannot pass, a cleaner might succeed. Laughter rolled through the alien audience. Some even jeered. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the creature still trembling on the sand. He wasn't brave, or so he thought, but he was kind. He slowly knelt, holding out his hand. The creature hesitated, then crawled into his palm, chirping softly. Elias smiled. There, little one. Easy now. The crowd went silent. The creature, calm for the first time, nuzzled his fingers. Valara's smirk faded. Then before anyone could react, she leapt from her platform, landing gracefully beside him. Her tail flicked in amusement. Interesting, she murmured. Tell me, human, how did you do that? Elias shrugged. Didn't do anything special, just didn't scare it. Valara's eyes glittered, intrigued. Without warning, she reached out and pinched his cheek. So soft, she said mockingly. No claws, no fangs, and yet the creature trusts you more than my warriors. The entire arena gasped again. It was meant as a joke, a gesture of mockery, but something electric passed between them. Elias didn't flinch. He only looked at her, calm and steady. For the first time in her royal life, Princess Valara felt her heart skip a beat. High above, the royal emblems glowed crimson. A voice from the palace AI announced, "Unexpected response detected." The test is not complete. Valara's smile returned, but this time it wasn't playful. It was curious. Dangerous. Perhaps, she whispered. The test has only just begun. That night, the silver moons of Zintheria hung low over the royal city, painting the glass towers in soft blue light. The arena's laughter had faded hours ago, but Princess Valara couldn't sleep. The image of the quiet human standing calm while every warrior failed haunted her. She had seen warriors with blades for bones, scions who could bend minds, yet none could tame a frightened creature. Only that janitor with his soft voice and steady hands had done it without force, without fear. Valara paced her balcony, tail twitching. What makes a human so different? She muttered. Finally, she gave an order. Bring Elias from maintenance, now. Deep below the palace, Elias was scrubbing a corridor floor when royal guards surrounded him. The princess requests your presence, the captain said. Elias blinked. Did I drop something? The guard said nothing, only escorted him through shining halls lined with alien runes. Everything around him glowed with soft energy. The floor hummed like a heartbeat. When the doors opened, he found himself inside the hall of trial, the same place where champions had been judged. Valara sat on her throne, expression unreadable. "So the human arrives," she said softly. "Tell me, Elias of Earth, do you know what you did today?" "I guess I just made the little thing stop shaking," he said. "You passed the royal test," she replied. "Even my finest warriors could not." Elias frowned. "Wasn't really a test, was it? Just needed a little kindness." Her eyes narrowed. "Kindness," she repeated, tasting the word like it was something foreign. "Strange. Our empire values victory, not kindness." She rose from her seat and walked toward him, her armor whispering like wind. "Tell me, human, how do your people win wars if they think this way?" Elias scratched his neck. "We don't always win, we just try not to lose ourselves." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them pulsed with quiet tension. Then Valara turned away. "You intrigue me, Elias. Perhaps there's more to your kind than sweat and servitude." "If that's a compliment, thanks," he said with a half-smile. To her surprise, she smiled back. It felt unfamiliar. Over the next few days, strange rumors spread through the palace. The princess had summoned the janitor again and again. Guards whispered that he dined in the royal courtyard, that she asked him questions no one dared to answer. In truth, Valara was running her own experiment. She gave Elias small challenges, puzzles meant for warriors. Each time he approached them differently. When faced with a combat drone, he didn't destroy it. He disarmed its battery and fixed its sensor. When ordered to carry heavy plasma shields, he rigged a floating sled to make it easier. Valara watched from her throne, fascinated. "You solve problems without fighting them," she said one evening. "Why?" "Because fighting breaks things," Elias replied simply, "and fixing things makes people trust you." That answer struck something deep in her. For years she'd been trained that trust was weakness, mercy was failure. But when she looked at this human, calm, tired, honest, she saw strength of a different kind. She circled him slowly, studying him. "You are a strange creature, Elias. You make my soldiers look like fools." "Maybe they just never had a reason to be gentle," he said. Valara stopped. For the first time in her royal life, she felt uncertain. Gentle, the word itself was alien, yet she couldn't deny its power. That night, she dismissed her guards and stood alone on her balcony again. Below, she could see Elias returning to his quarters, the soft glow of cleaning drones around him. She whispered to the stars, "A human janitor may have passed my test, but I must know if he can pass me." The next morning, a new decree was announced across the empire. The princess will personally train the human, Elias of Earth, in royal combat and command beginning tomorrow. The crowd gasped. No alien, no warrior, no being had ever been granted such an honor. Valara smiled quietly. For her, this was no longer a test of strength. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, curiosity mixed with emotion, and Elias had no idea what awaited him next. Morning broke over the crystal spires of Zintheria. The royal courtyard shimmered like glass under the rising suns. Soldiers and nobles gathered in silence, curious and skeptical. For today's event was unprecedented. A human janitor was about to train under Princess Valara herself. Elias arrived wearing the same gray uniform, broom still tucked at his belt. The crowd whispered and laughed. "He doesn't even have armor," one warrior muttered. Another scoffed. "He'll be dust before midday." Valara stood before him, radiant in her combat gear, twin blades humming with plasma. Her violet eyes gleamed with challenge. "Elias of Earth," she said, "today you face your first royal trial. Endure 10 minutes against me. If you can remain standing, you win." Elias exhaled slowly. "And if I don't?" Her lips curved. "Then I'll need a new janitor." The crowd burst into laughter. But Elias only smiled faintly and nodded. "All right, Your Highness. Let's begin." When the signal horn blared, Valara moved like lightning. Her first strike shattered the ground where he'd been standing moments before. Elias dove aside, rolling behind a pillar. Her next swing carved a burning scar across the marble floor. She was fast, too fast. But Elias noticed something. She didn't aim to kill. Her strikes were sharp, precise, measured. This was a test. He grabbed a metal maintenance pole lying nearby. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. When she lunged again, he blocked, not with strength, but with angle and timing. Sparks flew. The crowd gasped. Valara stepped back, eyes narrowing. You deflect rather than fight. Clever. Elias shrugged, breathing hard. Well, can't clean much if I'm dead. Her tail flicked in amusement. You mock me, human? Not at all, princess. Just surviving. Valara smiled, a rare, dangerous smile, and launched forward again. But this time Elias didn't dodge. He dropped his pole, ducked low, and kicked dust into her face. The warriors roared in disbelief. For a split second, the royal princess staggered. Elias used that moment to tap her armor chestplate with his broomstick, just once. Touch, he said softly. Valara froze. The arena went silent. Then slowly she began to laugh, a sound few had ever heard from her. You dared touch me with a broom? She said through her laughter. Elias grinned. You said 10 minutes. You never said I had to fight fair. The crowd erupted, some in anger, others in awe. But Valara's laughter grew louder. When it finally faded, she lowered her blades. You pass, she declared. Not because you fought well, but because you thought well. She turned to her guards. End the trial. The human remained standing. That night, as the palace quieted, Valara found herself replaying the moment over and over. The broomstick tap, his calm defiance. The smirk that refused to fade even under her power. Her attendants bowed and left her chambers. Alone, she touched the spot on her armor where he had tapped her. For some reason, it still felt warm.
What are you, Elias?
She whispered to herself. How can someone so ordinary feel so unshakable? She didn't know it yet. But across the palace, Elias sat by his small window looking at the twin moons. He too was thinking of her, not as a ruler, but as someone strange, conflicted, and lonely. He muttered, For someone with everything, she sure looks like she's missing something. The next morning, another royal announcement spread across Syntheria. The humans' training will continue. The next challenge, the trial of minds, no one knew what it meant. Some believed the human would finally fail. Others whispered that the princess had lost her reason. But deep within her, Valara was beginning to understand something terrifying. This human wasn't teaching her how to win. He was teaching her how to feel, and that realization scared her more than any enemy she had ever faced. The next dawn came with thunder over the royal city. Lightning forked between the twin suns, a rare omen said to appear before great change. Inside the Palace of Crowns, guards lined the obsidian corridors as Princess Valara prepared the next stage of the human's impossible journey, the trial of minds. Unlike the previous test of combat, this one would not be fought with blades or strength. It was the test no warrior had ever passed. It measured clarity, courage, and truth of thought. Elias stood before the princess in the Hall of Reflections, a vast dome of floating mirrors, each glowing with strange runes. The air shimmered with psychic energy that even made the royal guards uneasy. Valara faced him with her usual poise, but something in her eyes had changed. Curiosity had become fascination. Elias of Earth, she said, her voice echoing softly. These mirrors will enter your mind. They will show your fears, your lies, and the truth you try to hide. If your mind breaks, you fail. Elias rubbed his neck awkwardly. You mean? They read my thoughts. They show yourself human, and few survive that, he sighed. Guess there's a first time for everything. When the test began, the mirrors spun into motion. Light poured out like liquid silver surrounding him. In an instant, the hall vanished. Elias found himself standing in a strange, dreamlike field. Clouds rolling, shadows whispering. Then from the mist, figures appeared. He saw his home, Earth, broken by war, its cities burning. He saw people he'd lost, his sister, his comrades. The guilt he buried under quiet smiles, he fell to his knees. No, not again. A voice echoed inside his head. You think kindness can erase failure? He clenched his fists. Maybe not. But cruelty never fixes it either. The storm in the vision shifted. Slowly the fires dimmed. The mirrors began to calm. High above, Valara watched from her throne. Her eyes widened why the human's mind wasn't collapsing. It was adapting. His fear turned into resolve. His sorrow into understanding. Impossible, she whispered. Even I struggled with those illusions. Suddenly a shadow appeared in Elias's mirror. Tall, regal, with glowing eyes. It was Valara herself, but this was not the proud princess of the court. This was her reflection, cold, ruthless, crowned with flames. You pretend to understand me, human, the phantom hissed. But you don't know what it means to rule. Elias looked at her reflection, unafraid. Maybe not, but I know what it means to care about someone who's forgotten how. Valara gasped. For a second, the projection faltered. The mirror cracked, and then shattered completely. The entire chamber shook. Light exploded outward, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the radiance faded, Elias was still standing, and beside him the princess's armor flickered. Her psychic link had been pulled into his test. She looked shaken, vulnerable in a way no one had ever seen. What did you do? She demanded, voice trembling slightly. Elias smiled faintly. Didn't do anything. Maybe your mirror just showed you something you needed to see. Her lips parted. No words came. Around them the guards knelt in awe. The royal test of minds had been conquered by a human janitor. That night, Valara sat alone in her private chamber. The shards of a broken mirror lay before her, faintly glowing. When she looked into one piece, she saw not her reflection, but his. For the first time in her life, she felt doubt. Not about him, but about herself, her empire, her entire belief system. How can a species we enslaved, she whispered, be freer inside than we are? Outside, lightning flashed again, brighter, louder. Somewhere far below, Elias stood on the palace balcony, looking up at the same storm. He didn't know it yet, but something fundamental had changed. The princess's heart, once guarded by pride and protocol, had cracked open just enough for humanity to slip in. And in the royal court of Zintheria, that single crack could one day break an empire. Days passed since the trial of minds, but the palace had not recovered from the shock. The name Elias of Earth now echoed in every corridor, a human who had survived what no warrior, no telepath, no royal had ever endured. Some called it luck. Others whispered it was sorcery. Princess Valara, however, knew the truth. It wasn't power that carried him through that test. It was clarity, and clarity, she realized, was something her empire had long forgotten. Inside the grand library of Zintheria, Valara walked among hovering tomes and glowing relics. Her armored boots silent on the marble floor, she stopped before a massive star map displaying hundreds of conquered worlds. Each one shimmered with the royal emblem, a symbol of control, obedience, and order. For the first time, the sight didn't fill her with pride. It made her uneasy. We rule, she whispered, but do we deserve to? Behind her, a soft voice replied, Depends on how you treat the ones who can't fight back. She turned. Elias stood there, holding a cleaning droid by its broken arm. He had oil stains on his hands, dust on his uniform, but his eyes were steady. This little guy got kicked by a guard, he said casually. Didn't seem fair. Valara's expression softened. You fixed it? Tried to, he said with a small shrug. Guess I like helping things that can't help themselves. The words landed heavier than he intended. Valara looked at the flickering star map again, and saw for the first time the faces behind those glowing emblems. Not warriors, not enemies, just people. Elias, she said quietly, if my mother, the Empress, knew how much you've made me question, she'd have you executed. He smiled faintly. Guess that's motivation to keep your thoughts secret then. She almost laughed. Almost. That evening, a secret meeting gathered in the palace council chamber. High lords and generals bowed before Valara as reports poured in. Your Highness, one said, we cannot allow this human to remain. He undermines royal order. Even the guards whisper his name. He's dangerous, another added. Not for what he's done, but for what he makes others think. Valara listened, her face unreadable. When they finished, she rose slowly from her throne. Then let him be dangerous, she said. Because perhaps it's time someone reminded us what we've become. The room fell silent. No one dared speak again. Later that night, Elias was cleaning the outer garden when he felt a faint vibration beneath his boots. The ground lights flickered. Suddenly, Valara appeared beside him. No guards, no crown, just a long cloak that shimmered with moonlight. You shouldn't be here alone, he said softly. I'm never alone, she replied, her gaze scanning the stars. But I often feel like I am. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The night air carried the hum of faraway ships. Valara turned to him. Elias, if I told you I wanted to change things in it to make our empire see the truth, would you think me a fool? No, he said. I'd think you're finally human. She looked away, but her lips curved just slightly. Careful, Janitor. Words like that could start a revolution. Maybe that's exactly what's needed. Something in her heart stirred. Dangerous, thrilling, unstoppable. The same empire that had forged her into a weapon was now shaking because of a single human who didn't know how to bow. And deep within her, a decision was forming. She would no longer be her mother's perfect heir. She would become something new, something that could change everything. Tomorrow, she said quietly, we begin a secret mission beyond the capital. No one must know. If they discover it, we're both dead. Elias met her eyes, calm as ever. Guess I'll bring my broom. Never know when things get messy. Valara smiled for real this time, and just like that, under the twin moons of Zintheria, a forbidden alliance was born. A princess and a janitor, walking toward the storm that would decide the fate of two worlds. The royal city slept under the pale shimmer of twin moons when two shadows slipped through the service gates. One wore royal armor hidden beneath a plain cloak. The other carried a small toolkit and, as always, a broom strapped to his back. Princess Valara and Elias moved silently across the bridge toward the docking bay. For the first time in her life, the princess wasn't guarded by soldiers or servants. Tonight, she trusted only a human janitor. Are you sure about this? Elias asked, glancing at the glowing watchtowers. You're giving up a lot to take a walk with me, Valara smirked. Not a walk, human. A reckoning. They entered a small shuttle that hummed to life under her touch. The ship lifted gently off the platform, slicing through the night clouds like a shard of silver. Destination locked, the onboard AI announced. Set for the outer colonies, Valara said. The forgotten worlds, Elias frowned. Those are the mining planets, right? The ones you conquered decades ago? She nodded. We call them colonies, but they're prisons. I need to see them with my own eyes. Hours later, the shuttle descended over a red wasteland. The planet's sky was scarred by pollution. The air shimmered with heat and ash. Below them stretched endless mines and camps, thousands of alien laborers working under mechanical overseers. Valara stood at the viewport, her expression tightening. Our empire calls this prosperity, she said bitterly. But it's slavery. Elias looked out beside her. The scene reminded him of something from Earth's past. Things humanity had once done, things they'd promised never to do again. Sometimes, he said quietly, the powerful forget the difference between order and cruelty. Her tail flicked uneasily. And what would you do, human, if this were your world? I'd start by listening to the ones down there. His simple words cut through the noise of her thoughts like a blade of light. They disguised themselves and walked among the workers. Valara covered her royal crest with dust. Elias kept his head low. The laborers stared suspicious until a young alien girl stumbled toward them. Her hands were cut, her eyes pale with exhaustion. Please, the girl whispered. My brother's trapped in the drill pit. Before Valara could respond, Elias was already moving. He grabbed a crowbar from a nearby crate and sprinted toward the pit. Without hesitation, he jumped down into the dark tunnel where heavy machinery roared. The girl's brother lay crushed under debris, barely conscious. Elias pushed with everything he had, straining against metal beams that hissed with steam. Come on, breathe, kid, he grunted. Valara leaped in beside him. Her plasma blade ignited with a hiss, cutting through the wreckage. Together, they pulled the boy free. When they climbed back out, the entire camp had gathered. The slaves stared in disbelief, a royal saving one of them. A trembling overseer approached. Your Highness, you shouldn't— Silence, Valara snapped. These people are dying while you count profits. Effective immediately, this camp is under my command. Her voice carried like thunder. For the first time, the workers looked at her not with fear but hope. Elias met her gaze and smiled faintly. Guess we just started a revolution. That night, the workers sang old songs under the stars, songs forbidden for years. Valara sat beside the fire, armor dusty, face streaked with soot. You could have stayed on your throne, Elias said softly. Why risk everything? She stared into the flames. Because I'm tired of ruling people who only kneel. I'd rather stand beside those who stand back up. Elias nodded slowly. Then maybe you're more human than you think. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled. The stars above flickered like watching eyes. But far away, On Zintheria's capital world, the royal palace stirred. The High Empress had received the report. Her daughter had gone rogue, traveling with a human, freeing slaves, defying the crown. The Empress's eyes glowed with fury. "Bring her home," she commanded coldly. "Alive if possible, but bring the human's head." And thus the hunt began. The desert wind howled across the crimson cliffs of Tharnine as two fugitives stood before a dying fire. Princess Valara's cloak was torn, her royal crest hidden beneath grime. Beside her, Elias checked the battered shuttle's engines one last time. The hum was weak, just enough to run, not enough to escape a fleet. "They've found us," he said quietly. Valara didn't look up. "I know. My mother doesn't fail twice." Above them, black ships cut through the dawn, sleek, predatory, unmistakably imperial. Dozens of drop pods streaked downward like falling stars. Elias handed her a plasma rifle. "Guess diplomacy's off the table." She smirked, though fear flickered in her eyes. "I told you this would get messy, Janitor." "Good thing I brought my broom," he said, slinging it over his shoulder. The first wave of royal soldiers hit the ground hard, silver armor glinting, weapons humming. Elias ducked behind a wrecked hauler while Valara moved with lethal precision. Her blade sang through the air, deflecting plasma bolts, slicing through drones. For the first time, she wasn't fighting for the Empire. She was fighting against it. But there were too many. A blast caught her shoulder, knocking her backward. Elias ran to her, pulling her behind a rock ridge. Blood shimmered violet under the rising suns. "Don't touch me," she hissed through pain. "You're welcome," he muttered, ripping cloth from his sleeve to bind the wound. She tried to protest, but his calm hand silenced her. It was the same strange steadiness that had once tamed a frightened creature in an arena. Somehow it steadied her now. "Why do you always help?" she asked weakly. "Because somebody has to start." Valara looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her broke wide open. A thunderous voice echoed across the canyon. "Valara of Zintheria, you have betrayed the crown. Surrender yourself and the human." The Empress's flagship loomed above the clouds, massive and burning with power. A hologram of the High Empress herself shimmered in the sky, eyes blazing like twin suns. "Mother," Valara whispered. "You shame our bloodline," the Empress thundered, a royal hand stained by human filth. "Return now or watch the colonies burn." The soldiers parted to reveal a group of chained laborers, the same miners they had saved. Energy weapons were trained on them. Elias stepped forward. "Don't listen, she's bluffing." Valara shook her head. "She never bluffs." For a heartbeat, everything froze, the daughter of an empire staring up at the woman who had shaped her into a weapon. Then Valara did something no one in Zintherian history had ever done. She dropped her blades. "No more," she said loudly, her voice shaking but fierce. "I will not be your executioner." The Empress's image flared with rage. "Then you will die as one of them." The bombardment began. Beams of light rained down, scorching the desert. Elias grabbed Valara's hand and dragged her toward the shuttle. They stumbled through fire and ash as explosions tore the ground apart. The ship's hull screamed as they leapt inside. Elias slammed the controls. "Hold on!" The shuttle blasted upward through flames, spiraling toward the stars. Behind them, the colony burned, but the workers were running, scattering into tunnels, alive because of her command. Inside the cockpit, Valara gazed at the devastation below. Tears streaked through dust on her face. "I started this war," she whispered. "No," Elias said softly, gripping her shoulder. "You just ended their silence." For a long moment, they sat in silence as the stars unfolded around them. Her hand found his, hesitant, trembling, but real. "What now?" she asked. Elias looked at the distant stars ahead, the border worlds, the uncharted regions, the unknown. "Now we show them what it means to be free." Valara smiled faintly. For the first time in her royal life, she felt weightless, not because she'd escaped, but because she'd finally chosen. Behind them, the Empire burned with fury. Before them stretched a universe waiting to be rewritten, and at the heart of it all, a princess who had learned to feel, and a human who had dared to teach her. The legend of Valara and the human janitor had just begun.